name's Jeremy, and so I've had the opportunity to work for a lot of interesting companies here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Can everyone hear me okay since I'm not mic'd? All right, good. Currently, though, I'm trying to help the gnome travel around the world, so that's my current position. And I am a designer, but I've been in marketing and product and development organizations over my time as a designer. I do enjoy code, especially on the front end side. I am actually a fan of Agile. I think it actually works really well as a designer. I embrace it and enjoy it. And if you are a social media strategist, I do have a class score of 63, so you're good. And so just to level set here for a minute, I'd like to ask, so how many people work with a UX designer here? That's a pretty low number. You are UX designers. You can raise your hand. All right. Well, so then out of the people that raise their hand, how many people work with a dedicated UX designer, meaning that they have one on your product team? Oh, you are one. Okay. So it's very low as well. Okay. So just real quick, when I say designer, just in case everyone here hasn't worked with a designer before, or currently working with a designer, I feel like I usually kind of need to explain what a UX designer is, because sometimes people don't really understand that. As a UX designer, we make things for people, first and foremost. But we also make things for business. We understand there's a business need for our products. We're not artists. We enjoy working in ecosystems. We like it when the system works well together and all the pieces fit together neatly. We think visually. You'll see us sketching on whiteboards and sketching on paper quite often. We learn through observation. We like to watch people. We like to watch people use our product. We like to watch people use other products. We like to watch people and see what they do and how they interact with devices and systems in their life. And then we're just naturally curious. Not that everyone isn't, but I think designers have they're always very curious about how something works, and they kind of want to reverse engineer it. And whether you're making websites or interfaces or applications or sneakers or video games or phones or cars, actually I think this process is very similar, and I think designers all have these same traits across. So a lot of those things I just mentioned are born out of something called user-centered design, which is from the 70s. So it's been around for some time. And we have things like usability testing, which if you aren't aware, we actually have a nice usability lab just down the street here. Down the hallway, street, in the building. Things like interviews, contextual inquiries, surveys, focus groups, right? These are things we can use, like tools we can use to get closer to the customer, and things that designers we've been trying to follow for quite some time. But then it's interesting because if you read about Agile, right? So Agile methods like Scrum and XP both rely on a close and collaborative relationship with continual interaction with the customer and people who are paying for the software and who are going to use the system. So this is kind of from like Agile Manifesto type stuff here, right? So where we are born out of user-centered design to get closer to the customer, the whole Agile kind of methodology is also around getting closer to the customer, right? And so I want to level set, because during the Agile Fest, there were probably 500 people or so in the cafeteria, and I remember they were asking the question, how many people were interacting with their customer, and it was a really, really low number, unfortunately. So how many people in here get in the same room with your end customer, someone actually using the thing that you're building? So one person. Two. Oh, that's usually low. And so how many? Okay, so that's a really low number. So you're breaking all UCD methodologies, and you're breaking all Agile methodologies right there. So there's some work that needs to be done here, right? And so I just to take it up a notch, like how many people get any information about your customers, either through third parties or through maybe Forrester sends you something, or all right, so that number's a little higher. So a lot of the key of the stuff I'm talking about is getting closer to your customer. Is just a tenet that everyone's trying to follow. I just saw this article that I thought was funny. So this guy posted that he dropped over $40,000 when he could have spent $100. He was making a product for high-end fashion, targeted towards women, and very high-end fashion, very expensive high-end fashion. And the app was dependent upon you putting in your exact measurements. And so what happened was he couldn't get anyone to use his app. And after he spent some time developing it and launching it and marketing, he couldn't get anyone to use it. So towards the end, he sends out some surveys. So come to find out, women who would be in the area to purchase really high-end fashion they don't want to give their measurements out. Whereas women that made less money were okay with that. So basically, what he thought was his customer wouldn't actually do what he needed to do to make his product be useful or to have value. And so it's something he could have found out early on in the beginning by doing some rough prototyping, doing some focus groups, bringing some customers in, doing some surveys. He would have figured that out before spending $40,000 of his money trying to build the startup that actually didn't have any customers, right? And so over time, I've embraced lean as well. On the UX side, we tend to call it lean instead of agile. So that's what I'm going to talk about. So UX designers usually come from one of three places. Either we're kind of like from an agency consultant model, from a startup, or from a large organization like this. And I've actually personally worked, I've been in an agency and a consultant type business before, and I've also, obviously, I'm working here today. And then startup, I've worked at a startup, I have a lot of friends who do, and that's where I think a lot of the interesting stuff is happening right now. So let me just talk about startup for a minute. So startups kind of have a new Bible, and it's called the Lean Startup. Who here has heard of the Lean Startup? Very, very popular. It's rose the author to guru status almost. But the core component of the Lean Startup is the methodology around build, measure, learn, feedback loop, right? And in fact, I was at South by Southwest recently, and they actually had a whole Lean Startup track this year. And so Eric himself got on stage, talked a little bit. I got to see the founders of Airbnb and Uber and GitHub all talk about how they're applying these Lean Startup principles to their businesses. Really interesting stuff. From a UX perspective, I feel like there's some kind of key things some things to look at, like MVP, you'll hear over and over again, which it means minimal viable product. Some people argue it's minimal valuable product. And really it just means keep it simple, be able to launch something quickly and learn from it. Experiment via iterative prototyping, so building out these loose, kind of low fidelity, medium fidelity prototypes and quickly getting customer feedback. And then valuing that customer feedback, make sure your customers are in the room with you, make sure you're listening to your customers, and then shipping and launching often, about these release cycles. Like you really need to launch every two weeks is kind of the new norm of launching software. And the reason to do that is you launch something, you learn from it. If there was a mistake, you can course correct, and in 2 more weeks launch something else, you can fix it, right? But you're not learning if you're not launching. And so as a UX designer, when I look at these kind of core tenets of a lot of this type of stuff, I think, oh, MVP, designer, we like to keep things simple, right? Iterative prototyping, we actually build prototypes. Value customer feedback, hey, user-centered design, that's us. And then shipping, launching often. Our development organization is Agile, right? So these are things that we should be able to do. And so I'll talk more about this in a minute. So just the other places you might run into a UX designer. So if a designer comes from an agency background, usually making deliverables is your job. And if you've seen Mad Men, you know what I'm talking about. And a lot of it's very waterfall style. Like in fact, a lot of times you get paid to make deliverables. Like you get to go in your cave, you get to spend weeks and months designing out large grand scales of systems. You get to show it to the client, you get to pass it off to the client, right? And so very, very waterfall, right? If you're a UX consultant, it's a little bit different because you get dropped in kind of behind enemy lines. And either one, you need to fit in, so you're just doing whatever that organization does. So if they're waterfall, you're waterfall. If they're agile, you're agile. Or maybe they are waterfall, but you come in and you're trying to command and conquer them and try to move them to something like agile, right? So like I have some friends out at American Airlines right now, working try to bring the agile methodologies to them. And I know we have a whole organization of people here trying to help Sabre move in an agile manner, right? And then there's large organizations like this, and to me, large organizations are these mazes, right? These that you have to kind of navigate your way around. And so recently, I've been thinking, like, how do you get lean startup, and how do you get like large company, politics and the way they're organized, and the different groups, and the many people. Like, how do you get all that, and how do you merge those two together, right? And so there's this book called Inspired: How to Create Products Customers Love by Marty Kagan. And we were lucky because our CEO actually knows Marty. Marty was nice enough to come out here and talk with us. He's with the Silicon Valley Product Group, which is a venture capital firm. And he not only does he write books, but he has blog posts. But he talks about bringing kind of this lean kind of product-based methodology to different companies. And he goes out and watches companies, and he has his experience. He actually worked on Mosaic, the first web browser, and he's been out at eBay and Google and Amazon. He watches how these teams work, and it's these small kind of cohesive product teams that are actually delivering really good value right now, and he's trying to evangelize that. And he actually touches on large organizations quite often. In fact, chapter 30 is Succeeding in Large Companies Top 10 List. So it's a great book. You should check it out. But that's kind of for me when the light bulb went off, and I was like, large organizations, they don't have to be slow. There's no rule that says we have to be slow here. And so that's why how I learned to stop worrying and love the large organization. So software development's hard. I'm not saying it's not hard. It's not coal mine hard, but it is difficult. And there are many problems with it, and so I'm going to talk about some ways that we could actually fix those problems. So as a designer, kind of taking in this build, measure, learn methodology, it's actually kind of different for me too. Because designers, in a sense, even though we were centered around the customer, we were still very waterfall in many different ways. And so there's two habits that I had to break, I think, as a designer. So I think I got pretty good at designing things, right? But good at designing things doesn't equal good at determining what are the right things to build. And that's another tenet you'll hear over and over again, like determining customer value quickly and cheaply while you can. So you're not building large-scale, massive projects that you launch and then fail miserably. So it's about learning quickly about creating value for your customers. So who knows what this is? So this is a somewhat famous episode of The Simpsons where Homer is a long-lost brother who is very wealthy, owns a car company. And he invites Homer to come in and build the car for every man. And so I have a video clip here. Unfortunately, it's a very bad video clip off YouTube, but let's see if we can sense it.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed stockholders, members of the press, Your Holiness, tonight we are going to witness automotive history. All my life, I have searched for a car that feels a certain way. Powerful like a gorilla, yet soft and yielding like a dirt ball. Now at last, I have found it. Ladies and gentlemen, presenting the car designed for the average man. Any question? What is this monstrosity cost, Jerry? What's the sticker price? $82,000. This monstrosity cost $82,000. What have I done? I'm in the zoo with fun, but I'm ruined.
And so if he followed a couple of these key principles, that wouldn't have happened, right? So they were not listening to their customer. They weren't keeping it simple. It has every bell and whistle and demand. They weren't prototyping. They weren't putting things out there for people to test quickly, and they weren't shipping often. This is a very long development process for them, and they launched it and it failed. And you'll hear this type of story like over and over again. So that's kind of the first part. The second part is moving quickly. So as designers, a lot of times people talk about how we kind of go into our cave, and then we come out of our cave, and then we point and we say, you need to move that over 2 pixels, which is actually funny. This is actually just an image I pulled from the web, and then actually today there was an article from a designer from Google talking about why you should actually be very detail-oriented and move that button 3 pixels left. In fact, there's sites around that where about there's a site that actually kind of catalogs really cool, interesting, very, very small, nuanced details. But it's taking that and then balancing it with some of the newer methodology, which you'll hear again and again, like a rallying cry of like move fast and break things, and done is better than perfect. And so for us, it's this balance, right? Because we like things to be very detail-oriented, and we want a really nice, great experience. But we need to learn that we need to launch things. We need to get things out quickly to learn from our customers. If we're not learning from our customers, we're failing. And so again, it's keeping it simple, making sure you can prototype, build up from a prototype, and shipping often. So basically, it's kind of this embracing like this Lean UX and Agile. In fact, there's now a book called Lean UX, which was just released like a couple months ago. So it's rather than focus on artifacts, we focus on prototypes and validating those prototypes and discovery. With the added benefit of the prototype serve as a spec for delivery. So what's great about this prototyping methodology is when we're done prototyping, that's what we could take and work with the development team with, right? And so we don't need to have a large spec document, wireframe, detailed wireframes. A prototype can actually act as a spec in many of these cases. And so through discovery, which is testing with your customer, right, with business, we find what has value via prototyping, and then we quickly test it with our customers, and then quickly launch it, and then learn. And so some people with this says documentation absolutely is bad. It's not necessarily bad, but rough, quick, iterative prototyping is good. That is a good way to quickly get out lots of ideas. You're going to have lots of bad ideas. In fact, there's a movie director, Robert Rodriguez, and he always says you have to keep filming over and over and over again to get all your bad stuff out, because you're bound to have bad stuff. If every idea you have makes it into the product, you're not doing it right. You should have things that fail and that are killed. But it's always about getting closer and quicker to the actual experience with the customer. And so there's been lots of articles around lean UX and getting out of the liberals business, lots of charts around prototyping and validating. And then a lot of times in different organizations, UX is kind of pulled out from product development, right? And sometimes business is actually also pulled out from development. So sometimes you have development here, business here, and UX over here, and those are extremely dysfunctional organizations. But what's difficult is, I think most organizations today, before they move to the product methodology, are more of a kind of a swim lane methodology where there's like 22 projects going on, and there may be 5, maybe 10 UX designers, right? And they're out fielding as much as they can, as quickly as they can. But if you look at the companies that are truly fast and truly successful, you'll find out it's not how they're working. How they're working is UX is actually embedded in this product team. And in fact, it's a bit like Three Amigos, where UX, business, and development work together, like literally like sitting next to each other, working together day in and day out, giving each other ideas, bouncing ideas off each other, right? That's what they're doing. And this book, How to Create Products Customers Love, it kind of talks about this, right? And so for me, there was one interesting challenge as well. So when you've been from that agency model, so we have at Travelocity, we have an embedded product model, right? So I have a team of UX designers, highly skilled, highly talented UX designers, but we actually embed them in the product team. So they don't sit with me. They sit with wherever their product team is. So if we have, Travelocity's case, you can break up things like hotels and flights and landing home pages. And so we'll have a dedicated UX designer embedded in each one of those teams, right? And so basically they report to me, but they really dotted line to the product owner. And so a lot of people, this new way of working for designers is a bit uncomfortable because we're used to more the agency model where we're all sitting together in our little design zone and able to do our designery things. So no longer does the design manager dole out specific work of each person on the team. Instead, the designer's daily agenda is driven by the prioritized backlog of the Scrum team. So when the designer on the embedded team says, what do I work on next? Well, they look at what's next on the backlog, right? And that's what they work from. And so my job actually becomes more of making sure everything's consistent, making sure the flights team, the hotel team are talking and understand, and they're using similar components, and making sure everything's visually consistent. So my job actually changes. I'm not the one doling out the work, right? And so I'm working on my MBWA, which isn't these guys. It's actually management by walking around, which is actually a thing, where I spend most of my day walking around, going from team to team to team to team to check in on what's going on. Do you have everything you need? Are you working well? Did you notice this thing? Did you see this thing? Right? That's what I'm spending my day on. And so all these things aren't new. So here was an article from 2008 talking about what today we would call lean UX, but it wasn't a term back then. UX practitioners are part of the customer or product owner team. Cultivate a user validation group for use of continuous user validation, schedule continuous user research, prototype and low fidelity, treat prototypes as specifications. This was 2008, and the book for Lean UX just came out. I mean, so these aren't new ideas. I think finally they've just been kind of combined, and there's a name for them. So if there are any lines here, either real or imaginary, it's all about removing those lines, because walls equals slow. I think no matter where you are. In fact, in the last session I gave, there was someone who was working on a large project here at Sabre, and she mentioned that they had a designer, everything was going really well, and then eventually the designer had to be pulled off to go to another project, and she said that's when things started falling apart, right? Like little by little, a developer would say, oh, hey, what about this? What did this mean? Like, I don't understand this. Or, oh, we forgot about this use case, right? Like, those things would come up, the designer was no longer there, and so they would muddle around, try to figure it out, slow the whole process down, right? So having an embedded UX designer and having an embedded team, knowledgeable team that's cohesive and together and can make decisions on their own is really important. And so I do want to talk about Agile. I first gave this presentation to a group of designers instead of a group of developers, so I always like to talk a little bit about Agile for designers who haven't kind of experienced that yet. And it's funny because Agile means according to Google image search, means many different things. But in both Agile and Lean UX, everyone is involved, right? The customer is involved, business is involved, like everyone is knowledgeable, everyone is involved in this product team. And I do think, as a designer, because there are some designers who don't think this, that I think Agile is definitely better than Waterfall. I think it really shows the value of the product faster. And I think Agile can work really well with UX. We're seeing it work well with UX where we are. Now, Agile doesn't necessarily make better software somewhat, because really we're making software for these guys, our customers, and our customers, they don't really care what methodology we use, they just want something that works well for them, right? And so really what they want is they want something that's valuable, usable, and enjoyable, right? That's kind of the key for them. And so in our model, we kind of have like business is kind of like the lead for trying to determine what's valuable for our customers. Like we don't want to build feature sets that are not valuable, right? If you build a feature, you're adding to tech debt and testing. You don't want that feature. If it's not valuable, you don't want it. If it's not usable, you don't want it, right? So it's up to us to make sure the thing is intuitive, enjoyable, and usable. And enjoyable is kind of when we come together, where we find something that's truly valuable and truly usable. That's when it becomes truly enjoyable. And so it becomes this team where we're together, UX and business. And so we're determining value, we're trying to create this great experience, and we're just repeating this process, right? And this is where, where we're testing ideas, we're testing things out, we have ideas of how to improve things. Maybe we'll twist and turn, but we're just moving as fast as we can forward. So let me talk about how for a minute. So Bill Scott actually used to work at Airline Solutions quite some time ago, and since then he went to Amiibo, and then I think he went to Netflix, and now he's at PayPal. And PayPal is in a state that they're trying to improve right now. Over time, I think they thought PayPal as an organization got large and potentially slow. And so he's out there with a new group of people. But I thought this was great. He's actually kind of behind the curtains, kind of showing how he's working there. So he says, first thing he does, we gathered our designers, our product folk, our engineers, and took over a few conference rooms and began to operate like a startup. Again, a recurring theme you'll hear. Design was done on whiteboards, coded in real time. Usability tests were weekly tests with customers. So the pace was fast and furious. We're able to try dozens of experiences across desktop, tablet, and mobile in the time that it would have taken years at PayPal before. Build, test, learn became our mantra. Build, test, learn. Again, what you hear from the lean startup. Build, test, learn. And so he actually, he's really like behind the scenes. Like this is a slide from a presentation he gave, and it's showing that this is actually the room they're in, and there is the whiteboard. You can see there's Scrum all over there. And so not only is he reforming the teams, but he's actually doing things like trying to make the front end of PayPal more modern and more easily available for testing. So you could actually do multivariate and large-scale A/B testing quicker and easier. And so this is the type of methodology that the big guys are using, or the big kind of well-known guys like Google, Amazon, and Facebook, and also the small guys, things like Airbnb, Uber, and Square. These combined small product teams are how they're working. And so it's really, they're working differently, right? There's just a different way of working. And there's a series of books. I think, to me, this is kind of my collection of books that I think kind of talk about this. We're Inspired, Lean Startup, Prototyping, Running Lean or Lean UX, and then Storming. I think there's some really good kind of books to talk about this. Now, there are some common problems with getting started with this. So getting started is a problem. So Seth Godin writes a lot about this. Like, it's that little voice in the back of your head, the but, the what if, that speaks up at the crucial moment and defeats the joy and insight you brought to the project in the first place. And then he goes on to say, ship often, ship lousy stuff, but ship it, ship constantly. If you're not shipping things, if things aren't getting out to customers, you're not understanding how they're working and what the real value is. Spending too much time planning, right? You're finding it hard to take things out. You don't talk with your customer. With long planning cycles, things change over time, right? Which is something that Agile is trying to fix. And so, the longer it takes to develop, the less likely it is to launch, which I've seen that. I've been in projects that have gone on for years and then killed at the end because of the technology has changed or the customer didn't find value in it. And the book Rework, one of the founders of 37 Signals, talks about how planning is actually guessing in his mind, where he says you have the most information when you're doing something, not before you've done it. Yet when you write a plan, usually before you've even started. Another problem are teams, like having very, very large, big teams. So everyone now talks about you want to keep your team small, very small. And in fact, Amazon, they have something where they call 2 pizza teams. So your team should be able to feed on 2 pizzas. If you need more than 2 pizzas, your team is too big. And Spotify actually did a pretty good white paper recently where they wrote about this. And so Spotify is a music streaming service, a little bit like iTunes, but you can just stream the music and you pay a monthly fee. But they have a desktop app, they have an Android app, an iPhone app. And so they broke up their app into products. So that they could pull them into small teams. So basically a chunk of the application becomes one of the small teams. And I'll post these slides and you guys can download all this, but they actually have a really nice white paper where they talk about like how they did it, how they kept the consistency across the overall product, but still were able to break everything up into small teams to keep the speed, right? You only launch a number of times a year. You're trying to jam too much in a product, which always happens. You're looking for perfection. Whose desk is this? This is Mark Zuckerberg's desk. So stay focused and keep shipping. These are kind of mantras at Facebook. Facebook really kind of believes in these kind of ship often and keep shipping to learn. Stay focused, keep shipping, get excited to make things fail fast, try again. Steve Jobs is quoted as saying, real artists ship. Another problem is it's going to cost too much to try that out. How do we know our customers will even want this? And that's a big part of this, trying to make sure that your customer has value. So at Instagram, the Instagram founder spoke at a conference not too long ago, and they actually call it the Wizard of Oz technique for social prototyping, which I really like. And so they tested an early version of a feature which would notify you when a friend joined the service. So instead of building that out, they manually sent out people notifications like a human bot saying, hey, your friend's joined. And it turned out not to be useful. No one clicked on it, no one used it. So they wrote 0 lines of Python, and they had 0 lines to throw away. So they were able to test out a feature, and they didn't have to build the feature to see if it had any value. He goes on, he has a lot of really good points, a lot of things that recurring themes you'll hear in this presentation. So they're drawing on previous experiences, have a hypothesis, never build without sketching, learn in week-long increments. A lot of this stuff, it sounds like, oh wow, you're building a prototype and you're testing in a lab, that's got to be like 2 months worth of work. No, that's a week, and we do that at Travelocity. We'll take a couple ideas off the backlog, we'll build a quick prototype, we'll get it in 6 customers, and we'll work with them, and that really happens within a week. And so then there's also something called 404 testing. So there's a new travel site that's out, and I was playing around with it, and it was funny, I clicked on neighborhoods, and it pops out and it says coming soon. So on one hand, you might think, well, that's a horrible experience, like why did the designer let that in there? But on the other hand, if they're smart, and if they're tracking this, if a lot of people click on it, guess what? You should prioritize that higher in your backlog and build it. If no one ever clicks on that, you didn't spend any money, and you just kill it from the interface, right? So think about putting, you get to put fake elements. Our sister company, lastminute.com, they had a tile on their homepage that said, hey, try out our new, it was a theater ticket app or something. And you clicked on it, and then it said, sign up, we'll let you know when it's available. Right? And so depending on the number of people that would sign up for that, which would gauge the interest if that's actually value to their customer base, then they would go on and finish that out, right? And these are just some of the issues around software development. And there are workshops, there are conferences. There's actually a Lean Startup Conference where they have things like moving fast while caring about design and Hitmonk, creating a culture of experimentation, prototype and validate a big idea, running short experiments during a long product cycle, right? So these are all ways of prototyping, getting out in front of the customer and checking the value, usability, and enjoyability of your products. Since then, there's actually been a couple other ones. This was Lean Day UX, which I thought was awesome because it actually focused on implementing Lean Startup and Lean UX in the enterprise, which we are, and that's actually very cool. There's a Lean Day West that's coming out. So like this is like in the development organization where Agile now has, I'm sure, up-team conferences, now Lean UX also has roughly that many conferences. And then there are different companies who have taken it and kind of tweaked it a little bit. But again, it's all around, like here they have to learn, build, measure, right? It's all around that same kind of methodology from Lean Startup. And so what's great is all of these people say, and in fact, Marty Kagan says in his book, so he started as an engineer, he moved into product, he loves UX. He talks about all the time how companies aren't investing enough in UX, right? So we're an integral part of the product team, which we're happy about because sometimes we have been pushed to the side, so that's good. So let me talk about where I saw speed with all this. So product team 101. So there's a core team. Within this core team, there's a product owner, a UX, and a developer. It could be a tech lead, tech architect. And the key here is this is a persistent full-time product team, right? That's working together. So that's key. And actually for me that helps with resourcing. So when they say, well, how many UX resources do you need? I say, well, how many products are you investing in this year? You're investing in 5 products this year, I need 5 UX designers, right? Because we want to be embedded on the teams that are investing in building out new product. So the product owner, that guy's the boss, right? Maybe it's a little bit like this, like he's the boss and the UX designer is maybe the vice president with consultation consistently from the development team. Why? Would they be the CEO of their product or the president of their product? Because they get fired. They're the ones that need to meet the numbers. So when the numbers are not met, the product owner is held accountable and responsible for that. So this core team will actually generate these ideas for this idea backlog, right? So you have this idea discovery backlog. So say you have a product, you're working on an agent tool. The product owner says, man, here are like 30 ideas that I think would really improve the speed of this product. Like I think agents would really like this. Like that's an idea backlog. You have 30 stories written out and ready to go. The UX designer could take those stories off, right? And then build rough prototypes and test and determine if that actually was the right thing to be focusing on. So the discovery track is all about quickly generating validated product backlog items, and the delivery track is all about generating releasable software. So when something from discovery is validated, then it's moved on to the delivery backlog, right? Which I'm sure you guys are all very familiar with. And so here's the backlog. You pull some ideas off of it. You should have the ideas very visible. They should be up on a board somewhere. And then you prototype. You build a quick prototype, right? And it needs to be fast. It's okay to be rough, and you just need to keep moving. Let's see. Here we are testing some rough prototypes. This was a mobile prototype in the lab over here, and this was a purely to the customer functional prototype for application on an iOS device, but built within less than a week, right? And there are many different tools, literally hundreds of tools you could use to prototype. Envision, Acture, Balsamic, we use Acture mostly, but I mean there's like infinite number of these tools out there. And so what we do is in the lab, we'll actually bring in 6 customers in a day. It's actually really not that difficult. There's a company called Dallas by Definition we use here in the area. We say, hey guys, we're going to book, we did a tablet test recently. We're going to need 6 people who shop for travel on tablets. Can you bring them in? Right, and within days they'll have them ready and scheduled. We come in the morning, we run our prototypes, we run our tests, but it doesn't even have to be that formal, even though that's pretty informal, pretty quick actually. This is less informal here. One of our product owners at Starbucks, and luckily the gnome has some pool, and so people are always curious of what's going on. And this is funny because this is the manager of the Starbucks who quickly took one of the tests we were working on for our iPad app. And so very happy. But during this time, it's about determining what's valuable, what's usable, and what's enjoyable. And there's other things you can do as well. Like you could do click tests or surveys, or there's things like user Zoom where you can have thousands of people use or answer questions or click on if they know where the right part of the element of the page is. Right. So there's lots of different ways to do testing, but I do encourage you to get somehow in the same room with a real customer using your product. Nothing is better than that. And so from your backlog, some ideas, hey, these actually worked really well. The customer loved it. They found it easy to use. That's going on the delivery backlog. Some ideas, yeah, that was a bad idea. We're going to kill that, which again is a good thing. And then some ideas, we need to kind of work on that. And so what we do is, so during this day session where we have these 6 customers come in, we'll actually post up all the kind of prototypes we're working on the wall. So we'll print them out and post them up on the wall. And then as the day goes on, people kind of write comments, positive or negative comments, right, about different elements of what happened, right? So participant number 1 didn't notice this element, right? Boom, right? And then towards the end of the day, you'll start to see kind of groupings, right? And so after the 6 participants, we'll kind of take them down and group them and decide, okay, that was something that didn't work, and oh, these actually worked really well. Let's move them. And so within a single day, really, we're done. We've made decisions and we're moving on, right? That is it. And another reason why we can do it in one day is because we have the core team there, right? So we have the product owner, the developer, and the developer, tech architect there in the room watching the customer, and at the end of the day, they're definitely there to help make the decisions. So it's collaborative, the product manager, designer, and lead engineer all working together side by side to create and validate these backlog items. And so maybe, again, you have something that failed, it either failed, or maybe in some cases failed all 3. Usability, they failed to understand like what it was for, they failed to understand like it didn't have any value to them and what they do, and that's fine. You're experimenting, you're failing, you're learning, and you're repeating, right, over and over again. Some of the ideas you're going to want to refine and bring back for a second prototype, and some of the ideas are ready for development. And again, I just, and this has been very hard. This is hard for any product owner. Like, obviously, everyone wants our ideas to be good ideas. You should have lots of ideas that fail, that were you killed, right? And in fact, that's kind of like a badge of honor, or something you should actually be graded on potentially, is how many ideas did you go through, and how many of those ideas did you kill? Because not every idea should make it to the final product. That's not how this should work, right? And I mentioned this all works within a week. We do this in a week all the time, right? This is a week or less worth of work. So get moving, right? And this is, I don't know, kind of what it could look like, where you have iterations, and then there's a discovery track, and some people call this dual scrum, right? So you have a delivery design track, and then you have kind of build delivery track, and discovery is then feeding in to the build track, right, as you move along. And so hopefully quickly you have boatloads of ideas kind of coming down and moving from discovery to and filling up your backlog, so giving you all really good, validated, great ideas for you guys to build, right? And so I think I have kind of like 5 things for me that kind of unlock this for me. The combined product team. That's kind of, if you're in a project-based organization, that's difficult. But again, if you read any of these books, you look at the methodologies, having these dedicated, persistent, not too big product teams with embedded UX, that's key to speed. If you're looking for speed and you're looking to create something that customers will truly love, that is key. And that's hard in some organizations, because some organizations don't look like that. Then having the one UX designer per team, that's also new in a lot of cases. A lot of companies barely have 2 UX designers for the whole company, let alone 1 per whatever products they're investing in, right? And I think that's key. And not to dismiss, because I think the tech architect and the developers need to be there every step of the way as well. In fact, Marty Kagan always says, to him, the engineer is kind of the leader of the closest to the innovation of now. Like who better that could tell you what's possible than the engineer, right? This fast iterative prototyping, that speeded up like the product kind of like ideation and validation process immensely. Getting in front of customers weekly. So in some cases you'll hear where they want like a specific product to be in front of customers every single week. We're not that fast yet because we have multiple products, so we basically have usually 1 product a week, but they're different products. So because for us we have 5 or 6 products, that means we have 5 or 6 of these sessions every week. So we're not quite that fast yet, but we're moving. And then this build, test, learn, right? That's just something that you'll hear over and over again, and something that I think is really the mantra. So I think in no time at all, you too can be a lean, agile, prototyping, shipping, UX design master or developer, worthy of the lean guru himself. And that's the end of the presentation.
So you're in Travelocity.
Yes.
How often have you been able to make Travelocity